Previously on X-Files Recaps.
And they lean into each other like this. Out of nowhere, a damn bee that was stuck under her collar from the bee dome just up and bites her, or stings her, whatever the case may be, in the back of the neck. Nice way to kill a moment, bee. Stupid bee. This is why I'm called Bee Killer File. Just so. As if it wasn't bad enough to kill the mood, the bee has also inflicted some kind of illness upon Scully. Mulder thinks it's anaphylactic shock, but she does not have an allergy to bee sting. She's going down to the ground and diagnosing herself on the way down because she's Scully and she's a badass and she can do all that. He calls the ambulance. The ambulance shows up. They won't let him in the back with her. He goes up to the window, bangs on the window and says, "Hey, what hospital are you taking her to?" The ambulance driver pulls out a gun and shoots Mulder in the head. At which point, they drive away and the real ambulance drives up. So they have been intercepted and played for fools. He wakes up in the hospital a few days later and the lone gunmen are there. And they say that they found the bee in the hallway and she had a reaction to that and that he almost died by being shot in the head, but instead he was only grazed and knocked unconscious. He says he's got to borrow Byers' clothes, so he sneaks out of the hospital to save Scully. He meets up with this lovely Englishman who is part of the conspiracy, but he's not all slimy and ugly like the rest of them. He's actually very nice and well-spoken, and he may have sold the human race down the river, but I would still kind of like him as my grandpa. Anyway, he drives him off in this car and says that there's a vaccine, which he gives to him, and it has to be administered within 48 hours. And he gives him the coordinates to where she is, too. And then he pulls out a gun and shoots the driver in the head. And he's like, "Trust no one." And Mulder's like, "Don't worry, I didn't already. You just shot a dude." And he's like, "Get out of the car and go." So Mulder gets out of the car, gets about halfway down the alleyway, and boom! The car goes up in flames. Nice, poor little grandfatherly conspiracy guy has died. Next thing you know, Mulder is in the Antarctic in a snowcat looking for Scully. He comes up to this thing that looks kind of like a base camp, and so he decides to snoop around a little bit. He falls through the ice into kind of like this big chamber thing, and he crawls through it for a little while, and then it's like this massive structure underneath the earth. It's all like industrial looking, and there are pods with people in them. They're like suspended in this green shit. It's kind of like Austin Powers, only not even remotely funny, okay? He's going down the aisles of these green people that have aliens growing inside of them, and he sees Scully. And so he like bashes in the glass in the front, and all this liquid comes out of her, or comes out of the tank that she's in, and he injects her, and she blinks. She wasn't looking too good, but she blinked. And so then she starts to like gag and stuff, and everything that was in this tube that she's been intubated with kind of like goes into her body. And Mulder's like, "Ew, that can't be good." She starts to gag, so he takes it out of her mouth, and it's like 3 feet of this coiling cord. It's kind of gross. And then she like coughs up the rest of her bodily fluid that has just been pumped back into her. And she says the profound statement, "I'm cold." Really, Scully? We had no idea. So, Mulder puts her down, he wraps her little naked body up in his snowsuit, and they start to leave. Meanwhile, he has triggered some kind of a massive alarm. Cigarette smoking dude is up in the control room, and he's like, "Oh, Mulder has the vaccine. I guess we should evacuate now." He doesn't seem surprised, which has always kind of surprised me. Anyway, they're on their way out, and everything starts melting. I guess because of the evacuation, something was triggered, and it was like a self-destruct thing. So all the ice is melting, and the aliens are gestating. They're like coming out of people's bodies and chasing them, okay? Mulder is running through this structure, and he's trying to find like some place where they can get out. And so he finally sees a vent. He's like, "Scully, grab the vent." He's got her in a fireman's carry, and she doesn't answer. And he's like, "Oh shit, Scully." And she's not breathing. So he has to give her mouth to mouth with the aliens like chasing after them. He finally gets her to wake up. They crawl out of there just in the nick of time, and then there's like this sound, this rumbling sound. And all of a sudden, the ice behind them starts to like break up. Okay? Just like falls out of nowhere. And so they get up, they start to run like hell through the snow, just away from this. Doesn't work. They get, thrown down into the snow. And I guess Scully kind of passes out at that point. But Mulder doesn't. He looks up to where the ground just collapsed, and a spaceship is flying through the air. They were inside a spaceship. Of course, Scully doesn't see it, but she does wake up immediately as soon as the spaceship is gone. Go figure. Why? At that point, Scully wakes up and she's kind of like cuddling Mulder to keep him warm. You never find out exactly how they get back to Washington, but they do. The next thing you see is Scully in OPR talking to the panel about everything that's happened to her. And of course, they don't believe any of it. They are left pretty much with no hard evidence again. And just when you think it looks pretty bad for them, Scully takes up the vial that has the bee in it that the lone gunman got for her, and she sticks it down in front of them and she says, "This is hard evidence. So I don't think the FBI has a unit that is qualified to handle this kind of case. Hint, hint. We want the X-Files back. You should reopen them." Later, Mulder meets Scully over by the reflecting pool, and they're reflecting about what's happened to them over the past couple of days. He shows her this newspaper article that's totally bogus about what happened in Texas. He's just completely dejected. He's like, "I can't believe, after all of this, we still can't prove anything." And Scully looks at him and says, "Well, if we quit now, they win." And they hold hands, they walk off into the sunset. The last scene is set in a cornfield in Tunisia. Apparently had moved their entire operation. The cigarette smoking man gets out of a helicopter and goes and talks to one of the other guys in the syndicate, and he shows him a telegram. And he says, "What are we gonna do about the Mulder problem?" And he says, "It's just one guy. Mulder is just one guy. One man alone cannot fight the future." And then the cigarette smoking man walks away and he drops this telegram on the ground that he's shown him. And it says, "X-Files reopen, stop. Please advise, stop." And you zoom out and the cornfield is there and the bee domes are there. And that's the end. Isn't that exciting? It's one of my favorites.
I made this. No, really, I did.